You're telling me that humans, actual living, breathing humans, are coming here? First Navigator Zilix's voice rose to a pitch that made the ship's environmental sensors register concern. That's what the transmission said, Captain Vereen replied, her 4 eyes blinking in rapid succession, a sure sign of anxiety among the Qalarian species. The Galactic Council approved their response to our distress call. Zilix's tendrils coiled tightly against his thorax. But they're deathworlders. Class 12. Did nobody think that was relevant information when they sent the SOS? I believe the general understanding was that we needed help, and we needed it yesterday. Vereen's mandibles clicked in what passed for a sardonic smile. Besides, they're sending a diplomatic vessel, not a warship. Oh, how wonderfully reassuring, Zilix said, voice dripping with sarcasm. A diplomatic vessel crewed by beings evolved to survive conditions that would liquefy our internal organs. What could possibly go wrong? Communications Officer Nix spun her chair around, the motion causing her bioluminescent spots to pulse with excitement. Actually, according to the transmission details, they're sending a ship called the Relentless. That doesn't sound very diplomatic, muttered Zilix. The humans insisted it was the closest vessel that could reach us within the time frame required, Vereen explained. Apparently it's some type of rescue ship. Zilix's laughing sac inflated with a snort. Rescue, right, because nothing says we come in peace like a vessel named the Relentless. Would you prefer we all die here on this forsaken moon while waiting for the Council's bureaucrats to file the proper paperwork? Vereen's tone hardened. The mining colony is running out of atmospheric stabilizers. We have over 200 crew and colonists trapped by that avalanche, and whatever native organism is emitting those spores is slowly eating through our filtration systems. A moment of silence fell over the bridge, broken only by the persistent warning beeps of failing systems. Fine, Zilix finally conceded. But when these humans arrive, I'm staying on the ship, with my environment suit on, and a stunner within reach. Noted, Vereen said dryly. Now let's prepare for our guests. The Relentless will be here in 6 rotations. Nix's spots flickered with what might have been amusement. Actually, Captain, they've adjusted their estimated arrival. They'll be here in 2 rotations. Vereen's outer eyes blinked in surprise. 2? That's impossible. Even with their advanced drives, the nearest jump point is, they said, and I quote, hold tight, we're taking a shortcut. Commander Alexei Volkov of the Earth Emergency Response Vessel, EERV, Relentless, stood in the ship's command center, arms crossed as he stared at the tactical display. Around him, his crew worked with the efficient precision that came from years of drilling for exactly these kinds of situations. Talk to me, Lieutenant Reed, he said, voice carrying easily across the humming bridge despite its low volume. Sir, we've got a bad situation on Proxima Centauri's outermost moon, Reed replied, her fingers dancing over the holographic interface. Qalarian mining colony with approximately 800 personnel. Local geological instability triggered what they're calling an avalanche, though given the moon's composition, it's more likely a landslide of metallic hydrogen compounds. 200 colonists trapped, failing life support, and some kind of hostile biological agent compromising their systems. Volkov nodded once. Time frame? Their captain estimates complete system failure in 9 days. We can reach them in 2 if we take the Kuiper Belt shortcut. A low whistle came from the navigation station. The Kuiper Belt route? Through the debris field? That's insane even by our standards, Commander. Volkov's weathered face broke into a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Insanity is relative, Lieutenant Kowalski, especially when measured against alien standards. He turned back to Reed. What do we know about Qalarians? Methane breathers. Gravity adaptation around 0.7 Earth standard. Their biochemistry is silicon-based, and they're particularly vulnerable to oxygen, which acts as a corrosive agent to their tissues. Even brief exposure to our atmosphere would be unpleasant for them. So we'll need to wear our rescue gear, Volkov said. Environmental containment protocols. No contamination risks. And they think we're the dangerous ones, quipped Chief Engineer Daniels from her station, not looking up from her calculations. Volkov's lips twitched. We are the dangerous ones, Chief. That's why we're the ones answering their call. He straightened up. Kowalski, plot the Kuiper shortcut. Reed, inform the Qalarians we're coming. ETA 2 days. Daniels, I want the rescue modules prepped, and the atmospheric converters ready to produce methane if needed. Sir. Daniels looked up, her dark eyes serious. The Kuiper route will put significant strain on our hull integrity. We'll need to run the gravitational compensators at 120%. Will it kill us? Volkov asked bluntly. Probably not, she replied with a shrug. Good enough. He turned to the entire bridge. Listen up, people. These aliens think we're monsters from a death world. Let's show them that sometimes monsters are exactly what you need when death comes calling. As the crew burst into action, Volkov allowed himself a small, genuine smile. Humans had spent millennia being afraid of the dark, of the unknown terrors that might exist among the stars. How ironically beautiful that when they finally ventured out, they discovered they were the terrors that other species feared. The Relentless dropped out of FTL with a ripple of distorted space-time that sent the Qalarian sensors into fits. The ship that appeared seemed impossibly sleek and predatory to Zilix's eyes. A dark, angular shape against the starfield, broken only by pulsing blue running lights and what appeared to be heavily armored modules along its ventral side. By the ancestral mists, Zilix murmured. That's not a diplomatic vessel. That's a warship. It's a rescue ship, Vereen corrected, though her voice held a note of uncertainty. The humans specialize in emergency response. Because they evolved on a planet that's constantly trying to kill them, Zilix shot back. Their idea of an emergency probably involves wrestling with creatures twice their size while standing in liquid fire. Nix's voice interrupted their bickering. Captain, we're receiving a transmission from the Relentless, audio and visual. Put it through, Vereen ordered, straightening her posture in what Zilix recognized as her official diplomat stance. The main view screen flickered, and then they were face to face with it, a human. Zilix couldn't suppress a shudder. The creature was tall, bipedal, with a hard-looking external carapace colored deep blue with silver accents. Its head was covered in some kind of transparent dome, revealing a face that was mostly flat except for a protruding central structure and two predatory forward-facing eyes. Those eyes, Zilix noted with mounting horror, were the kind evolved for hunting, not grazing or scavenging like civilized species. Greetings, Captain Vereen, the human said, its voice surprisingly clear through the translator. Commander Alexei Volkov of the Earth Emergency Response Vessel Relentless. We received your distress call and are here to render assistance. Vereen performed the traditional greeting gesture, pressing her upper limbs together in a show of respect. Commander Volkov, your prompt arrival is most appreciated. Our situation has grown dire. The human's face moved in a way that exposed its bone structures. A smile, Zilix recalled from the xenobiology briefings, though on a predator species it looked unnervingly like a threat display. We're aware of your situation, Captain. My team is preparing to deploy rescue modules that can withstand the local geological instability. We've also brought atmospheric stabilizers compatible with methane-based life support systems and a suite of biological countermeasures for your spore problem. Zilix couldn't help himself. You just happen to have all that specialized equipment on hand? The human's eyes shifted to him, and Zilix felt a primal chill run down his central nerve cord. First Navigator Zilix, I presume? When Zilix reluctantly confirmed, the human continued. The Relentless is designed to respond to emergencies across multiple species parameters. We carry modular systems that can be rapidly configured to most known biochemistries. It's literally our job to be prepared for anything. Impressive, Vereen commented, shooting Zilix a warning glance. We were not expecting such thoroughness. Humans have a saying, Captain. Expect the best. Prepare for the worst. Volkov's expression shifted, becoming more serious. Now, I need a full briefing on your colony's situation. My science officer has analyzed your moon's geological composition, but we need more data on the avalanche site and the trapped colonists. Zilix wanted to point out that it was deeply unsettling how these humans had apparently conducted a full geological analysis of their moon in the brief time since arriving. But Vereen was already engaging with the terrifying alien. Of course, Commander. We can transmit all relevant data. However, our communication with the trapped colonists has been sporadic at best. The metallic compounds in the landslide are creating significant interference. The human nodded. We anticipated that. We'll deploy ground-penetrating radar once we arrive. Captain, with your permission, I'd like to bring the Relentless into low orbit and dispatch our advance team to your command center. Vereen hesitated only briefly. Permission granted, Commander. We'll prepare for your arrival. As the transmission ended, Zilix turned to his captain, antennae vibrating with stress. You're letting them come here, in person? We requested help, Vereen said firmly. They've traveled across multiple systems to provide it. The least we can do is show proper hospitality. Hospitality. Zilix repeated faintly. To creatures that evolved on a planet with gravity that would crush us, in an oxygen atmosphere that would dissolve our organs, who consider temperatures that would boil our blood to be a nice summer day. Yes, Vareen said simply. Because right now, those nightmare deathworlders are the only chance our people have. 6 hours later, Zilix found himself standing nervously in the colony's main docking bay as the human shuttle completed its landing procedures. Despite his earlier protests, Vareen had volunteered him to be part of the welcoming committee, citing his need to broaden his xenobiological horizons. The shuttle was smaller than Zilix had expected, but no less intimidating. A sleek, dark craft that looked as though it had been designed with both efficiency and threat in mind. As the external hatches cycled open with a hiss of equalizing pressure, Zilix instinctively stepped back. The first human to emerge was Commander Volkov. In person, even enclosed in what the humans called an environmental suit, he was more imposing than he had appeared on the view screen. Tall, broad-shouldered, moving with a fluid grace that seemed at odds with a species evolved in such punishing gravity. Behind him came 4 more humans, each carrying equipment cases that would have required at least 2 Qalarians to lift. Captain Vareen, Volkov said, his voice slightly distorted through his suit's external speakers. Thank you for receiving us. I hope our methane-oxygen mix is comfortable for you? Perfectly suitable, Commander, Vareen replied. We appreciate your consideration. Zilix noticed that the humans had indeed adjusted their environmental suits to exude a methane-rich atmosphere around them. A gesture of goodwill that, despite himself, he found touching. These are my senior officers, Volkov continued, gesturing to each human in turn. Lieutenant Reed, my second-in-command, Dr. Okafor, our xenobiologist, Chief Engineer Daniels, and Lieutenant Kowalski, our navigation and terrain specialist. Each human acknowledged the introduction with what Zilix assumed were respectful gestures, though on such alien physiologies, it was hard to be certain. This is my first navigator, Zilix, Vareen said, nudging him forward slightly. And our chief medical officer, Dr. Thrix. Volkov turned those unsettling forward-facing eyes on Zilix. First navigator, your reputation precedes you. I understand you're one of the few Qalarians who successfully navigated the Persephone Nebula. Zilix's antennae twitched in surprise. You know about that? We make it a point to study the achievements of other species, Volkov replied. Especially when those achievements involve navigational feats through challenging stellar phenomena. Before Zilix could formulate a response, alarms began blaring throughout the docking bay. Captain Vareen's communicator buzzed urgently. Captain! Came the panicked voice of Officer Nix. The southern containment dome has just lost pressure integrity. Atmospheric venting in sectors 7 through 12. Evacuation protocols, Vareen ordered immediately. Get everyone to the emergency shelters. How many colonists are in the affected areas? At least 50, Captain, and the emergency seals aren't responding. The control systems are offline. What's happening? Volkov asked sharply. Vareen's inner eyes blinked rapidly, a sign of extreme stress. The biological contamination must have reached the dome control systems. We're losing pressure in the southern quadrant where we house most of our hydroponics and atmospheric processing. To Zilix's astonishment, the humans didn't hesitate. Volkov immediately turned to his team. Reed, Kowalski, grab the portable atmospheric stabilizers. Daniels, we need emergency seals. Dr. Okafor, prepare for potential methane-based biological contamination. Then Volkov turned back to Vareen. Captain, we need to move, now. My team is equipped to handle vacuum exposure and emergency sealing procedures. Lead the way to the affected sectors. But, Zilix began, the southern quadrant will be decompressing. Even with your suits, the structural integrity is compromised. It's too dangerous. Volkov gave him a look that Zilix couldn't quite interpret. Navigator Zilix, with all due respect, this is what humans do. As the mixed group of aliens raced through the corridors toward the failing dome, Zilix found himself re-evaluating everything he thought he knew about these deathworlders. They weren't running away from danger. They were running toward it. The scene at the southern containment dome was chaos. Emergency lighting bathed everything in pulsing red, and the distinctive hiss of escaping atmosphere created an ominous background noise. Qalarian colonists were streaming away from the affected sectors, many assisted by colony security personnel. Volkov took in the situation with a single sweeping glance, his training automatically cataloging threats, resources, and priorities. The breaches were visible even from the secured antechamber where they stood. Ragged tears in the dome's structure where some kind of viscous dark material appeared to be growing. Those aren't mechanical failures, Dr. Okafor noted, already scanning with a handheld device. That's biological intrusion. Some kind of extremophile organism is literally eating through the dome materials. The spores, Captain Vereen said grimly. They've accelerated their reproduction cycle. Lieutenant Reed had already unloaded the portable atmospheric stabilizers, devices that looked to Zilix like sleek silver cylinders with complex control interfaces. Commander, we can deploy these at the primary ventilation nodes. They'll generate enough methane-rich atmosphere to compensate for the leakage, but they're a temporary solution at best. Daniels was examining the structural schematic a nervous Qalarian technician had provided. The primary seal controls are located here, she said, pointing to a section alarmingly close to the largest breach. If I can reach them, I can override the system and reinitiate the emergency protocols. Too dangerous, the Qalarian technician chittered. That section is already experiencing significant decompression, and the organism, it seems to be attracted to electrical systems. Volkov turned to Vereen. How many of your people are still trapped inside? Sensors indicate approximately 47 life signs, Vereen replied, her voice tight with stress. Mostly agricultural specialists and dome maintenance crews. Reed, deploy those stabilizers now. Buy us some time. Volkov's voice was calm but carried absolute authority. Kowalski, I need a route map to those life signs with minimal exposure to the breaches. Daniels, prep the emergency seal kit. Dr. Okafor, I need something that will at least slow that organism down. The human team moved with practiced precision, each attending to their assigned tasks without hesitation. Zilix found himself standing uselessly to the side, watching in a mixture of awe and horror. You can't seriously be planning to go in there, he finally said. Volkov glanced at him as he checked the seals on his environment suit. That's exactly what we're planning, Navigator. But the structural integrity, the organism, the decompression, all hazards we're trained to handle, Volkov replied simply. Your people are in danger. We have the equipment and training to help. What's there to discuss? Your suits can't possibly withstand. Our suits, interrupted Daniels with what sounded like pride, are designed to withstand the vacuum of space, temperatures ranging from near absolute zero to over 500 Kelvin, and pressure differentials that would crush your ships. They're also equipped with repair nanites that automatically seal breaches. Zilix's tendrils coiled in disbelief. But why risk yourselves? You barely know us. We're not even from the same stellar neighborhood. Volkov paused in his preparations, fixing Zilix with a steady gaze. Because this is what humanity does, Navigator. When someone calls for help, we answer. It doesn't matter if you're human or Qalarian or any other species. Danger is our natural environment. Saving lives is our purpose. Before Zilix could formulate a response, Reed returned. Stabilizers deployed, Commander. They'll maintain minimum viable atmosphere for approximately 2 hours. Good. Kowalski? I've mapped 3 potential routes to the trapped colonists, sir. The most direct path takes us through a section with active biological growth, but it's the fastest. Dr. Okafor? The xenobiologist held up what looked like a modified weapon. Concentrated alkaline solution with copper nanoparticles. Based on the preliminary scans, it should be toxic to the organism without damaging the Qalarian technology or life forms. Volkov nodded. Excellent. He turned back to Captain Vereen. With your permission, Captain, we'll proceed with the rescue operation. Vereen's 4 eyes blinked in sequence, a gesture of profound respect among her people. Permission granted, Commander, and thank you. As the humans prepared to enter the compromised dome, Zilix found himself stepping forward. I'm coming with you. Every head, human and Qalarian alike, turned to him in surprise. Navigator, Vereen began cautiously. That's not necessary. I know the dome systems better than anyone here, Zilix insisted, surprising himself with his determination. And I've studied the organism since it first appeared. You'll need my expertise. Volkov studied him for a long moment, then nodded. Can your environment suit withstand brief exposure to partial vacuum? Yes, Zilix replied, suddenly less certain of his impulsive decision. For short periods. Stay between Reed and Daniels at all times, Volkov instructed. Follow our lead, and if we tell you to do something, do it immediately without question. Understood? Zilix's antennae twitched nervously, but he straightened to his full height. Understood, Commander. As they approached the airlock that would lead them into the failing dome, Volkov placed a suited hand on Zilix's shoulder, a gesture that would have seemed threatening if not for the context. One more thing, Navigator, the human said quietly. On Earth, we have a saying, courage isn't the absence of fear, it's acting despite it. Remember that. With those words, the airlock cycled open, and they stepped into chaos. The interior of the southern dome was like something from a Qalarian nightmare. The once pristine agricultural sectors were now a landscape of twisted metal and pulsing organic growth. The alien organism had spread further than Zilix had feared, creating web-like structures that seemed to connect the various breaches in the dome. Through those breaches, the thin atmosphere of the moon was visible, a stark reminder of how precarious their situation was. "Life signs?" Volkov asked tersely as Reed consulted her scanner. "Clustered in 3 locations," she replied. "Largest group is in the central hydroponics lab, approximately 200 meters ahead. They've sealed themselves in, but their atmospheric reserves are critical." "Daniels, what's the structural integrity looking like?" The engineer was examining a different device, her expression grim behind her faceplate. "Not good, Commander. The organism is specifically targeting the load-bearing elements. I estimate less than 90 minutes before catastrophic failure." "Then we work fast," Volkov said simply. "Okafor, test your compound on the nearest growth. Let's see what we're dealing with." The xenobiologist approached a pulsating mass of the organism that had enveloped what appeared to be an atmospheric regulator. She carefully sprayed her solution onto a small section of the growth. The effect was immediate. The organism recoiled, the affected area turning from a sickly purple to a dull gray. "It's effective," Okafor reported, "but I have limited quantities. We'll need to be selective." "Priority is clearing a path to the colonists and the seal controls," Volkov decided. "Navigator Zilix, which way to the central hydroponics?" Zilix, who had been trying very hard not to panic at the sight of his colony being devoured from within, forced himself to focus. "Through that archway," he indicated with a trembling tendril. "But the main corridor will be heavily infested. There's a maintenance tunnel that runs parallel. It might be clearer." "Lead the way," Volkov said, gesturing for Zilix to go ahead. The group moved through the devastated dome, their progress slowed by the need to navigate around structural damage and patches of the voracious organism. Zilix found himself impressed despite his fear. The humans moved with a coordination that spoke of extensive training, always watching each other's positions, communicating with hand signals and brief verbal cues. They reached the maintenance access point, and Zilix keyed in his override code. The panel flickered weakly, then the door slid open to reveal a narrow tunnel bathed in emergency lighting. "This will take us directly to the hydroponics lab," Zilix explained. "The atmospheric systems are separate from the main dome, so it should be relatively uncontaminated." They filed into the tunnel, with Kowalski now taking point, his scanner sweeping ahead for any signs of the organism. They had progressed perhaps halfway when a violent shudder ran through the entire structure. "That wasn't good," Daniels muttered, checking her instruments. "Stress fracture in the western quadrant. The dome's failing faster than predicted." Another tremor, stronger this time, nearly knocked Zilix off his feet. Only Reed's quick reflexes, startlingly fast for such a large species, kept him upright. "Commander!" Kowalski called from ahead. "We've got movement. The organism is in the tunnel systems too, but it's retreating?" "Retreating?" Okafor pushed forward, scanner in hand. "That doesn't make sense unless—" Her voice cut off abruptly. "Oh, it's not retreating, it's converging. The organism is responding to the structural weakening. It's reinforcing itself." "How intelligent is this thing?" Reed asked, weapon raised toward the darkness ahead. "Not intelligent," Zilix found himself answering. "It's a colonial organism, like your earth corals or slime molds. It reacts to environmental stimuli. If the dome is weakening, it's moving to the points of maximum stress," Volkov finished grimly. "Where it can absorb the most energy when the structure fails." "Exactly," Zilix confirmed, impressed despite himself at the human's quick understanding. "But that means—" "The hydroponics lab is right at one of those stress points," Daniels said, checking her schematic. "Double time!" Volkov ordered, and suddenly they were running through the maintenance tunnel, the humans easily outpacing Zilix despite their bulky suits and equipment. They burst into the hydroponics lab to find a scene of tightly controlled panic. About 30 Qalarians were huddled in the central area, while a few technicians frantically worked at the environmental controls. The lab's transparent ceiling showed an alarming view of the dome above, fracture lines spreading like a web across its surface, with the pulsing organism growing along each crack. "Medical Officer Thrix!" one of the Qalarians called out in relief when they saw Zilix. "The humans! You brought the humans!" Zilix didn't bother to correct the case of mistaken identity. "What's your status?" he asked the nearest technician. Atmosphere is down to 23% of optimal levels, the technician replied, antennae drooping with exhaustion. Emergency reserves depleted. The organism breached our primary systems 2 hours ago. Volkov had already moved to assess the situation, with Reed coordinating a headcount of the trapped colonists. Daniels and Kowalski were examining the lab's structure, while Okafor analyzed samples of the organism that had penetrated the space. We need to move these people immediately, Volkov decided. The lab won't hold much longer. Navigator, is there another way out besides the way we came? Zilix consulted the schematics in his portable device. There's an emergency evacuation tube that leads directly to the Eastern Dome, but... He hesitated. It passes through the main atmospheric processing center, which is likely ground zero for the organism, Okafor concluded. Options? Volkov asked, looking at each of his team. We could try to clear a path through the processing center with the remaining alkaline solution, Okafor suggested. But I can't guarantee how effective it will be against a concentrated mass. What about reinforcing this position? Reed asked. The lab has independent life support, even if it's failing. If we can boost it with our portable units, not viable long-term, Daniels cut in. The structural integrity is compromised. Even if we shore up the atmosphere, when that dome goes, it's taking everything with it. Another violent tremor shook the lab, this one strong enough to crack one of the floor panels. Several Qalarians cried out in alarm. We're out of time for debate, Volkov said firmly. Evacuation tube it is. Okafor, you and I will clear the path. Daniels, prep our remaining atmospheric stabilizers to create a breathable corridor. Kowalski, map the fastest route to the Eastern Dome. Reed, organize the colonists for rapid movement. As the humans burst into action, Zilix found himself staring at Volkov in something approaching awe. You're really going to do this, he said quietly. You're going to risk everything to save people you don't even know. Volkov paused in his preparations. What would you have us do, Navigator? Leave them to die? No, but... Zilix struggled to articulate his confusion. On my world, we're taught that other species act primarily in self-interest, that altruism is limited to one's own kind. The human made a sound that might have been a laugh. Then your teachers need to get out more. His expression grew serious. Look, Zilix, humans come from a world where danger is constant, where nature itself can kill you 1,000 different ways. We survived by helping each other, by running toward the fire, not away from it. That's why you're called deathworlders, Zilix realized. Not because you bring death, but because you've learned to defy it. Something like that, Volkov said with a small smile. Now, are you going to help us save your people, or just stand there philosophizing? For perhaps the first time in his life, Zilix felt something like the courage these humans seemed to take for granted. I'll help. Good man, Volkov said, clapping him on the shoulder, a gesture that nearly knocked Zilix over. Let's get to work. The journey through the emergency evacuation tube was a nightmare of narrow passages, failing systems, and the ever-present threat of the organism. Okafor led the way, methodically clearing sections of the alien growth with her dwindling supply of alkaline solution. Daniels followed, deploying atmospheric stabilizers at regular intervals to maintain a breathable corridor for the Qalarian colonists. Zilix found himself in the middle of the group, helping to guide the weakest colonists, many of whom were suffering from exposure to the thinning atmosphere. Behind them, Reed and Kowalski brought up the rear, ensuring no one was left behind and monitoring the structural integrity of the passage. They were approximately halfway to the Eastern Dome when disaster struck. Commander? Kowalski's voice cracked over the comm system. Seismic activity! The whole moon is... His warning was cut short as the evacuation tube shook violently. Metal screamed against metal, and a section of ceiling collapsed just behind the last group of colonists. Reed dove forward, physically shielding 2 Qalarian children from the falling debris. Status! Volkov barked, already moving back through the group. Tube's compromised, Reed reported, rising to her feet with a Qalarian child under each arm. The path behind us is blocked. Forward is still clear, Okafor called from the front. But I'm detecting increased organism activity ahead. It's responding to the seismic event. Another tremor, stronger than the first, sent everyone staggering against the walls of the tube. This isn't just dome failure, Daniels said grimly, checking her instruments. The moon itself is becoming unstable. Commander, I think we've got bigger problems than the organism. Volkov made a decision. Change of plans. Eastern Dome is no longer the priority. Kowalski, find us the fastest route to the landing pads. We're evacuating everyone off this rock. Sir, the Relentless doesn't have capacity for the entire colony, Reed pointed out. No, But we can get these people to the orbital platform, Volkov replied. Captain Vereen needs to initiate full colonial evacuation, now. He activated his long-range communicator. Volkov to Captain Vereen, do you copy? Static answered him.
Damn it.
The seismic activity must be interfering with communications. Zilix stepped forward. I can help. The maintenance systems have emergency communication relays designed to function during structural failures. Show me, Volkov said immediately. Zilix moved to a control panel that, miraculously, still had power. His tendrils worked quickly over the interface, bypassing security protocols and rerouting power to the emergency systems. There, he said as the panel flickered to life. We should have a direct line to the command center. Volkov leaned in. Volkov to Vereen, emergency communication. Do you copy? After a moment of static, Vereen's voice came through, distorted but audible. Commander, we've lost contact with half the colony. What's happening? Captain, the moon is becoming unstable. This is no longer just a dome failure or biological contamination. You need to initiate full evacuation protocols immediately. There was a pause, then Vereen's voice again, sounding strained. Confirmed, Commander. Evacuation protocols initiated. We're dispatching all available shuttles to collection points. What's your situation? We've recovered approximately 30 colonists from the hydroponics lab. We're proceeding to landing pad 3 for extraction. Be advised, the evacuation tube to the eastern dome is no longer viable. Understood. I'll redirect resources to landing pad 3. Vereen out. As the communication ended, another tremor shook the tube, this one lasting several seconds longer than the previous ones. We need to move, Volkov said grimly. Kowalski, get us to that landing pad. This way, the navigation specialist said, indicating a junction ahead. It's a maintenance access that should take us directly to the pad infrastructure. They resumed their careful procession through the failing structure of the colony, the situation growing more desperate with each passing minute. Twice more they encountered dense growths of the organism blocking their path, forcing Okafor to use the last of her deterrent solution. Just as they reached the final stretch before the landing pad, a massive shockwave rippled through the entire structure. The lights flickered and died, plunging them into darkness broken only by the emergency lights on the human suits. What was that? Zilix gasped, his bioluminescent spots flaring with alarm. Structural failure in the main dome, Daniels reported, her voice tight. Complete collapse imminent. Volkov didn't hesitate. Everyone move, now! The group surged forward with renewed urgency, the humans physically supporting Qalarians who were too weak to run. Ahead, Zilix could see the airlock that would lead them to the landing pad, and safety. Then the floor buckled beneath them. With a scream of tortured metal, a section of the corridor gave way, creating a yawning chasm at least 3 meters wide. Beyond it lay the airlock, tantalizingly close, yet suddenly unreachable. The colonists halted in dismay, tendrils writhing in distress. Even Volkov paused, quickly assessing the new obstacle. We can't jump that, Zilix said, his voice hollow with defeat. Qalarian physiology, we don't have the leg strength, not in this gravity. Then we make a bridge, Volkov said simply. He turned to Daniels. The emergency sealing kit, the structural supports. Understanding dawned on the engineer's face. It might work, but they're not designed for that kind of stress, Commander. Make them work. While Daniels quickly unpacked what looked like telescoping metal rods from her equipment, Volkov turned to the group. We need to move fast. When the bridge is ready, the colonists cross first, youngest and weakest at the front. My team will bring up the rear. Another tremor shook the corridor, and a distant boom echoed through the structure. Kowalski checked his scanner, his expression grim behind his faceplate. Main dome has collapsed, Commander. Eastern dome integrity at 42% and falling. Daniels had finished assembling her improvised bridge. 3 metal supports laid side by side across the gap, their ends wedged into the buckled flooring on either side. It'll hold one at a time, she reported. Maybe 2 of the smaller ones together. But it's not stable. We need to move now. Go! Volkov ordered, and the first Qalarians cautiously began to cross, their movements tentative on the narrow supports. Progress was agonizingly slow. Though the distance wasn't great, the Qalarians' natural caution and weakened state made each crossing a nerve-wracking ordeal. By the time half the group had made it to the other side, the tremors were becoming near constant. Something's changed, Okafor said suddenly, her scanner beeping urgently. The organism, it's moving, fast, toward us. It must be fleeing the collapse, Zilix theorized, looking for new structures to infest. Or it senses body heat, Reed suggested grimly. New food sources. A horrifying screeching sound emanated from the corridor behind them, as though metal was being torn apart by immense force. Then, in the dim emergency lighting, they saw it. A writhing mass of purple-black tendrils, surging toward them with unnatural speed. "Last colonists across now," Volkov ordered. "Reed, Okafor, go with them. Get to the landing pad and prep for immediate evac." "Commander," Reed began to protest. "That's an order, Lieutenant," Volkov cut her off. "Get these people to safety." Reed nodded reluctantly and helped the remaining Qalarians across the makeshift bridge. Okafor followed, carrying a Qalarian child who had been too frightened to cross on their own. Now only Volkov, Daniels, Kowalski, and Zilix remained on the wrong side of the chasm, with the organism approaching rapidly. "I'm detecting multiple structural failure points," Kowalski reported tersely. "This whole section is going to go in less than 2 minutes." "You three go," Volkov said. "I'll hold it off." Zilix stared at the human commander in disbelief. "Hold it off? How?" In response, Volkov unholstered what looked like a weapon from his suit. "Thermite charges, last resort. They'll create a heat barrier the organism can't cross immediately. Should buy enough time." "But the structural damage," Daniels began. "Is already catastrophic," Volkov finished. "A little more won't matter. Go, now." Daniels and Kowalski reluctantly moved toward the bridge, but Zilix found himself rooted to the spot, staring at this alien who was calmly preparing to sacrifice himself for people he barely knew. "Navigator," Volkov said sharply. "Move." "No," Zilix heard himself say, surprising even himself. "I know this organism better than you do. I know where to place those charges for maximum effect. You're needed to coordinate the evacuation." The human commander stared at him for a long moment, then nodded sharply. "Daniels, Kowalski, cross now," he ordered. As they complied, he handed Zilix one of the thermite charges. "Place it directly on the main mass. Timer is set for 30 seconds. Zilix took the device, its weight unfamiliar in his tendril. "Go, Commander. I'll be right behind you." Volkov gave him one more assessing look, then crossed the makeshift bridge with surprising agility for such a large being. The moment he reached the other side, Zilix turned toward the approaching organism. It was closer now, its mass pulsating with unnatural life, tendrils reaching hungrily toward him. Summoning courage he never knew he possessed, Zilix darted forward, placing the charge directly on what appeared to be the central mass of the organism. He activated the timer, then turned to flee. But he'd miscalculated. A tendril whipped out, wrapping around his leg, yanking him off balance. He fell hard, the breath knocked from his respiratory sacs. The organism began to drag him backward, away from the chasm, away from safety. Through a haze of panic, Zilix saw Volkov on the other side of the gap, already removing his helmet. "No!" Zilix cried out. "The atmosphere, it'll kill you." But the human had already made his decision. Dropping his helmet, Volkov leapt across the chasm in a single bound that no Qalarian could have managed, landing with a heavy thud beside Zilix. With his bare hands, exposed now to the methane atmosphere that Zilix knew was caustic to human tissue, Volkov grabbed the tendril constricting Zilix's leg and tore it apart with sheer brute strength. "Come on!" Volkov gasped, his exposed skin already blistering from atmospheric exposure. He hauled Zilix to his feet and practically threw him toward the chasm. Together they ran, the thermite charge's timer counting down behind them. They reached the edge of the gap just as another violent tremor shook the corridor. "Jump!" Volkov ordered, and Zilix did, propelling himself with every ounce of strength his Death World-evolved body possessed. He fell short. His upper body made it to the other side, but his lower half dangled over the abyss. Hands grabbed him, human hands pulling him to safety. As they dragged him clear, the thermite charge detonated with a blinding flash and a wave of intense heat. But Volkov wasn't with them. Zilix turned in horror to see the commander still on the other side of the rapidly widening chasm, cut off by a wall of flames that separated him from the organism, but also from escape. "Commander!" Daniels shouted in anguish. Volkov, his face visibly reddening and swelling from exposure to the toxic atmosphere, merely grinned through his pain. "Get to the ship," he managed to rasp out. "That's an order." Then the floor beneath him gave way, and Commander Alexei Volkov disappeared into the collapsing structure of the doomed colony. The shuttle lifted off from landing pad 3 with seconds to spare, as the entire southern half of the colony crumbled into the unstable surface of the moon. Inside, Qalarian colonists huddled together in shock and grief, while the human rescue team worked with grim efficiency to tend to the injured and monitor the failing moon. Zilix sat apart, staring out a viewport at the collapsing structures below. His mind kept replaying those final moments, Volkov removing his helmet knowing full well what the methane atmosphere would do to him. the raw determination on the human's face as he tore apart the organism's tendril with his bare hands. The smile, that inexplicable smile, as he ordered them to leave him behind. Why did he do it? Zilix asked quietly when Reed sat down beside him. He knew the risks. He knew what our atmosphere would do to him. Why sacrifice himself for me? Reed was silent for a long moment, her alien features difficult to read. Because that's who we are, she finally said. It's what we've always done. From the first time a human ran into a burning building to save a stranger, to the moment we reached the stars. But it's not logical, Zilix insisted, his scientist's mind struggling to comprehend. The commander of the mission should never risk himself for a subordinate, let alone for an alien he just met. Reed actually laughed, a short, sad sound. Logic had nothing to do with it, Navigator. You were in danger. He could help. For humans, that's enough. The shuttle docked with the Relentless, which had moved into low orbit to facilitate the evacuation. Captain Vereen was waiting in the docking bay, her 4 eyes blinking rapidly as she counted the returning humans. Commander Volkov? She asked, her voice hopeful. Reed shook her head once, and the Qalarian captain's antennae drooped in obvious distress. He saved us, Zilix said, stepping forward. He saved me, at the cost of his own life. We will honor his sacrifice, Vereen promised solemnly. For generations to come, the Qalarian people will remember the human who gave his life for us. Reed straightened, her grief visibly channeled into resolve. Captain Vereen, we need to complete the evacuation immediately. According to our sensors, the moon's core has become unstable. We have less than 6 hours before total collapse. Vereen nodded. Most of our people are already on the orbital platform. The last shuttles are en route now. Good. Once everyone's clear, we'll escort the platform to the nearest jump point and... She was interrupted by a communication alert from the Relentless bridge. Lieutenant Reed, came a voice over the speakers. We're detecting an anomalous signal from the surface. It appears to be Commander Volkov's emergency beacon. The humans froze, exchanging looks of disbelief and sudden desperate hope. Location? Reed demanded. Northern quadrant, near what appears to be a natural cave system. Life sign readings are faint but present. Reed was already moving. Prep Rescue Module 2 for immediate launch. Daniels Okafor with me. Kowalski, coordinate from the bridge. Wait, Zilix called after them. I'm coming too. Reed paused, studying him with those strange forward-facing eyes. It'll be dangerous. The entire moon is breaking apart. I know, Zilix said firmly. But he came back for me. I'm not leaving him down there. A slow smile spread across Reed's face, the same kind of smile Volkov had given him when he volunteered to help with the rescue. Welcome aboard, Navigator. The rescue module plunged through the turbulent atmosphere of the dying moon, its hull creaking under the strain of violent wind shears and electromagnetic disturbances. Inside, Zilix clung to his safety harness, wondering yet again what madness had possessed him to volunteer for this mission. Emergency beacon is holding steady, Daniels reported from the pilot's seat. 0.7 kilometers ahead, in a depression that appears to be a partially collapsed lava tube. Life signs? Reed asked tensely. Still present but weakening, Okafor replied. And I'm detecting trace elements of the organism in the vicinity. Of course we are, Daniels muttered, because this rescue wasn't already impossible enough. Zilix glanced at the humans, marveling at their calm in the face of near-certain disaster. They weren't ignoring the danger. Their instruments and conversation made it clear they were acutely aware of every risk, but they simply refused to be paralyzed by it. There! Reed pointed through the forward viewport, where a faint blue light pulsed amid the broken landscape below. Emergency beacon. Daniels guided the module down with expert precision, finding a relatively stable patch of ground near the beacon. The moment they touched down, warning klaxons began to blare. Surface instability critical, the module's computer announced dispassionately. Recommend immediate departure. Noted, Reed said dryly. She turned to the team. Suit sealed. Okafor, you're monitoring life signs. Daniels, you're on structural integrity. Navigator, stay between us and watch for any sign of the organism. We move fast, we grab the commander, we get out. Questions? There were none. They cycled through the airlock and emerged onto the surface of the moon. The landscape that greeted them was apocalyptic. Vast fissures cut across the once solid ground, venting plumes of noxious gas into the thin atmosphere. The horizon seemed to ripple and shift as ongoing tremors reshaped the moon's surface. In the distance, the collapsed remains of the colony were visible, a twisted mass of metal and synthetics, partially consumed by the spreading organism. Beacon is 50 meters that way, Okafor said, pointing to a dark opening in the ground. Some kind of natural cavern. They made their way carefully across the unstable terrain, the humans instinctively adjusting their movements to compensate for the fluctuating gravity as underground gas pockets collapsed and shifted the local mass. Zilix struggled to keep up, his body not evolved for such rapidly changing conditions. When they reached the cavern entrance, Reed shone a powerful light into its depths. The beam reflected off something metallic about 20 meters in. "Commander?" she called out, her voice amplified by her suit's external speakers. A weak flashing light answered her, the same pattern as the emergency beacon, but fainter. "He's signaling," Reed said, hope evident in her voice. "He's conscious." They descended into the cavern, finding a natural tunnel that sloped downward at a gentle angle. The walls glistened with some kind of liquid that Okafor quickly determined was not the organism, but rather a natural hydrocarbon seepage. The tunnel widened into a larger chamber, and there, propped against a rock formation, was Commander Volkov. His suit was torn and blackened, his exposed skin covered in blisters and chemical burns from methane exposure. The emergency beacon was clutched in one hand, a makeshift oxygen mask fashioned from suit components in the other. "Took your sweet time," he managed to say as they rushed to his side. "How in the 7 moons did you survive?" Zilix asked incredulously, while Okafor immediately began administering emergency medical treatment. "Fell into maintenance shaft," Volkov explained between labored breaths. "Emergency, oxygen reserve. Found natural oxygen pocket, down here. Volcanic activity." "He's right," Daniels confirmed, checking her instruments. "This cavern has elevated oxygen levels. Not Earth normal, but enough to keep him alive if he was careful. Atmosphere burns. Not fun," Volkov added, with what might have been an attempt at a smile. "Save your strength, Commander," Reed said firmly. "We're getting you out of here." "The colonists?" Volkov asked, his focus clearly still on the mission despite his condition. "All evacuated to the orbital platform," Reed assured him. "The moon is becoming unstable, but everyone got out safely, thanks to you." "Thanks to us," Volkov corrected, his gaze finding Zilix. "You placed that charge." "Perfectly." Before Zilix could respond, a violent tremor shook the cavern, dislodging rocks from the ceiling. Daniel's scanner began blaring urgent warnings. "We've got to move now," she said tensely. "This whole system is about to collapse. The tunnel we came through won't stay open much longer." Reed and Okafor carefully lifted Volkov, supporting him between them. Despite his injuries, the human commander insisted on helping, his legs moving unsteadily but determinedly toward the exit. They had nearly reached the tunnel when Okafor's scanner emitted a different alarm. "Contact! Organism detected, moving fast!" From a crack in the cavern wall, a tendril of the purple-black organism emerged, whipping through the air as if sensing their presence. More tendrils followed, converging toward the only exit. "It's blocking our escape," Zilix said, his voice tight with fear. Volkov, despite his weakened state, straightened. "Options?" "I've analyzed its movements more thoroughly," Okafor reported quickly. "It's not just attracted to heat or electrical systems. It's seeking out complex carbon chains, organic matter. So it's hunting us," Reed concluded grimly. "Not necessarily all of us," Zilix said slowly, a plan forming in his mind. "It's evolving to consume Qalarian biological material, silicon-based. Human biology is carbon-based, but fundamentally different." Volkov caught on immediately. "You think it might ignore humans in favor of you?" "It's a theory," Zilix admitted, "but one worth testing." He began to move away from the group, toward the opposite side of the cavern. "Navigator, what are you doing?" Reed demanded. "Creating a diversion," Zilix replied. "Get the commander out. I'll draw it away and follow another route." "Negative," Volkov said immediately. "We don't leave people behind." "You're not," Zilix assured him, feeling strangely calm despite the danger. "There's another exit, a smaller tunnel I spotted when we entered. It probably connects to the same surface network. I'm smaller, I can fit through." He gestured to Volkov's bulk. "You can't." Another tremor shook the cavern, more violent than before. Time was running out. "He's right, Commander," Daniels said reluctantly. "The structural integrity is failing everywhere. If we don't get out now, none of us will make it." Volkov looked at Zilix with an expression the Qalarian couldn't quite read, respect perhaps or recognition. "You sure about this, Navigator?" "No," Zilix admitted with a nervous laugh. "But I learned from the best. Sometimes courage isn't the absence of fear, right?" "It's acting despite it," Volkov finished with a pained smile. "We'll meet you at the module." 5 minutes, then we have to launch." "I'll be there," Zilix promised. then darted away from the group, his movements deliberately conspicuous. The effect was immediate. The organism's tendrils whipped toward him, ignoring the humans completely. Zilix led it on a circuitous route around the cavern, giving the rescue team time to help Volkov through the main tunnel. Once they were clear, Zilix made for the smaller tunnel he'd spotted. It was tight, painfully so, but his flexible Qalarian physiology allowed him to squeeze through where a human would have been hopelessly stuck. The tunnel twisted upward, occasionally branching. Zilix chose paths that seemed to lead toward the surface, all while hearing the ominous sounds of the organism slithering through the passages behind him. After what felt like an eternity of claustrophobic crawling, Zilix emerged onto the surface, but not where he had hoped. He was at least 100 meters from the rescue module, with a vast fissure separating him from it, and the ground beneath his feet was beginning to crumble. In the distance, he could see the module's engines glowing, preparing for departure. They couldn't wait any longer. The moon's final collapse was imminent. Zilix closed his eyes, accepting his fate. At least he had helped save the colonists. At least his death would mean something. A thunderous roar made him open his eyes again. The rescue module had lifted off, but instead of heading for orbit, it was flying toward him, maneuvering perilously close to the unstable ground where he stood. The side hatch opened, revealing Reed secured by a safety line, her arm extended toward him. "Jump!" her amplified voice commanded. The gap was at least 4 meters, an impossible distance for a Qalarian. But as Zilix looked at the human reaching for him, he remembered Volkov's impossible leap back in the colony. Remembered the commander's words about deathworlders and the dangers they had evolved to overcome. Zilix gathered himself and jumped with every ounce of strength his body possessed. He wasn't going to make it. He could tell immediately that his leap would fall short. Then Reed's hand closed around his outstretched tendril, the human's deathworld strength easily supporting his weight as she pulled him into the module. The hatch sealed behind him as Daniels immediately sent the craft climbing steeply away from the disintegrating moon. "Cutting it a bit close there, navigator," Volkov commented from where he lay strapped to a medical support unit, looking pale but very much alive. "I learned from watching humans," Zilix replied, suddenly overwhelmed by exhaustion and relief. "You all seem to have a talent for last-minute escapes." Volkov's laugh turned into a pained cough, but his eyes remained bright. "Welcome to the club." 3 weeks later, Zilix stood on the observation deck of the Qalarian refugee vessel New Dawn, watching as the Relentless prepared to depart. The evacuation had been completely successful. All 803 colonists had been rescued before the moon's catastrophic collapse. They were now en route to the nearest Qalarian settlement, where they would begin again. Behind him, the door hissed open, admitting Commander Volkov. The human still moved with a slight limp, and the skin on his face bore the marks of serious chemical burns that even advanced human medicine couldn't completely heal. But he was alive, and according to Dr. Okafor, would make a full recovery. "Ah, there you are, navigator," Volkov said, joining Zilix at the viewport. "I wanted to say goodbye before we left." "You're heading back to Earth?" Zilix asked, surprised at the pang of regret he felt. "Not immediately. The Relentless has been reassigned to patrol this sector. Apparently, the Galactic Council was impressed by our handling of the situation. They've requested a more permanent human presence in the region." "I can't imagine why," Zilix said dryly. "You only risked your life multiple times, saved an entire colony, and discovered a previously unknown organism that can consume synthetic materials. All in a day's work for a deathworlder, I suppose?" Volkov smiled, a gesture Zilix no longer found threatening. "Actually, I came to make you an offer." "An offer?" "The Relentless needs a new navigation specialist. Someone familiar with this sector of space. Someone who's proven they can keep a cool head in a crisis." The human raised an eyebrow. "Interested?" Zilix stared at him in shock. "You want me, a Qalarian, to serve on a human vessel?" "Why not? You've already demonstrated all the qualities we look for. Intelligence, adaptability, courage. The fact that you come from a different evolutionary background is a bonus, not a hindrance." "But I'm not a deathworlder," Zilix protested weakly. "My species evolved on a world with minimal environmental hazards." "And yet," Volkov countered, "when faced with a collapsing moon, a voracious organism, and near certain death, you didn't freeze. You adapted. You survived." He placed a hand on Zilix's shoulder, the gesture now familiar rather than alarming. "Maybe being a deathworlder isn't just about where you evolved, but about how you respond when death comes calling." Zilix looked past Volkov to the stars beyond the viewport. All his life he had navigated safe, predictable routes, avoiding danger rather than confronting it. But in the past 3 weeks, he had discovered something about himself. Something he might never have known if not for the humans who came to their rescue. "When do I start?" he heard himself say. Volkov grinned. "Knew you'd see it my way. Report to the Relentless at 0800 tomorrow. Fair warning. Lieutenant Reed runs a tight training program for new crew." "I'd expect nothing less from a ship full of deathworlders," Zilix replied with a newfound confidence. As Volkov turned to leave, Zilix called after him. "Commander? That saying you told me about courage not being the absence of fear. What about it? I think I finally understand what it means." Volkov nodded, a look of genuine respect in his eyes. "Welcome to the crew, Navigator Zilix." 3 months later, an emergency transmission was received at Galactic Council headquarters. "This is the EERV Relentless responding to distress signal from Sector 9. We have reports of a spatial anomaly threatening the Zentari colony. Please advise all vessels to clear the area. We're going in." In the background of the transmission, Council analysts noted the voice of what sounded like a Qalarian officer, calmly providing navigational coordinates with the steady confidence of a seasoned deathworlder. The SOS had reached the deathworlders, and once again, they hadn't sent aid. They had sent the Relentless, and this time, Navigator Zilix was leading the way. End.